Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. Welcome to 50 Weeks That Shaped America, Week 10. This is our semi-quincentennial series, and this week's installment is a doozy. This week, we will go to the winter and spring of 1998, when a scandal is exploding in Washington, D.C. around the personal behavior of President Bill Clinton. There were no shortage of stories about Bill Clinton's bad personal behavior, but in this moment, attention was focusing on his sexual relationship with a White House intern, Monica Lewinsky. Now, it's one thing to abuse your power and behave inappropriately, and it's another for people to find out about it. And for people to find out about it, you need a media environment built for scandal, intrigue, speed, and rumor. Well, lucky for us, we were just starting to really get that in 1998. So I would say this is sort of a 2-in-1 50 Weeks That Shaped America that we have here on our hands, because it's not just our chance to talk about the Clinton-Lewinsky affair, but also the radical shift in news and journalism that was taking place right at the same time, the rise of the internet and the real arrival of cable news as a major force. So let's get into it. 2 parts on Clinton, Lewinsky, Linda Tripp, the Drudge Report. And yes, this is our first proper Fox News episode as well. Maybe we'll even mention Saturday Night Live somewhere in here. But here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kelly Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
Early core political memories, I think, for many of us here.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also a lot of stuff that I didn't know about and, wasn't really tracking as a high schooler at the time. But look, I am looking at some of our prep materials for this conversation, and I found an article that was extremely useful, and it is called American Politics Came of Age with Monica Lewinsky. That's the headline. And it is written by a historian who I had to look up a little bit more about. Very intrigued by this, but is it Dr. Nicole Hammer? I think. Is it Hammer?
I think it's maybe with an E.
Yeah. Oh, Hammer.
Positive, it's Hammer. Positive.
Nikki, you wrote this article for the 20th anniversary, right? So what, 8 years ago now.
Many
at this
moons
point?
ago.
And we will, over the course of 2 episodes, back up your claim that this shaped modern American politics. But want to give us a little tease on why you think it's so impactful? And I guess also, did it really shape our politics or our media? Which one did it have the biggest impact on? To ask the biggest question first.
Well, to answer the biggest question first, I am of the firm belief that our politics and media constitute one another. So they're actually inseparable. You get the politics that your media system provides, and you get the media system that your politics provide. And I think that this is an excellent moment to test that thesis, because it is the era of trash tabloid television, the rise of the internet, the rise of 24-hour cable news, right-wing talk radio. All of those things are coming onto the scene in this moment. And it is helping to both foster and reinforce a politics of scandal. Now, the politics of scandal had been around for a little while, growing in part out of the Watergate scandal and the belief by Republicans that they needed to generate equivalent scandals in order to damage Democratic presidents, but also the kind of breakdown of the secrecy regime around the presidency that Watergate also gives birth to, right? Presidents having extramarital affairs, I think, is about as old as the presidency, would you say, Kelly?
Yeah, no question.
And certainly those mid-20th century ones, right? The presidents of the television era, Kennedy, Johnson, like they were having a lot of relationships with women who weren't their wives while in office, and the press knew about them. Yeah. So there's something has shifted in the media and political landscape by the time we get to Clinton.
And not just presidents, but congressmen and elected officials. I mean, tale as old as time.
All right, here we go. The Monica Lewinsky. Actually, do you say affair, scandal? Does it matter? I was going back and forth, but
like scandal.
Yeah. I go back and forth too, and I tend not to use scandal because I think that scandalizing something is a process more than a descriptor. But affair is challenging here too, because it's about an affair.
It is an affair.
And it highlights Monica Lewinsky when she is not the main bad actor in this situation.
So we need some sort of third word, right? Maybe we'll find it.
I know. I know.
But let's actually talk about the relationship between Lewinsky and Clinton and the kind of rough timeline of that affair, and then about how it all began to leak. And then we'll get a sense of the media environment into which that story dropped. But, Monica Lewinsky was a White House intern. It began their relationship began in 1995 when Clinton was 49 years old and Lewinsky was 22. It lasted for 18 months. Lewinsky would go on to say she had sexual encounters with Bill Clinton on 9 occasions between November of 95 and March of 97. There is a slightly deeper backstory here that we need to lay out, which is that Clinton having an affair was not a new piece of information here.
No, not at all. I mean, from the moment I would say he became the governor of Arkansas, like that was part of his own sort of reputation and scandal as well, that there are these secretive extramarital affairs that are happening. There are many occasions, at least 3 that become pretty prominent throughout his career that stand out as like moments in which people are attempting to dismantle his leadership by discrediting him, by pointing out these affairs. They don't stick in the same way that Monica Lewinsky sticks. And I think part of that is just the role that he had as president versus being governor.
Although there is that famous moment on 60 Minutes where he and Hillary Clinton give a joint interview and she kind of backs him up, right? And that was a huge moment.
Yeah, it's a video worth watching because it's during the 92 campaign. It's over his affair with Jennifer Flowers, which I think there might have been secret tapes involved with that as well. But that Hillary Clinton's self-presentation in that interview with her little headband and her little bob and her Southern accent thicker than you'll probably ever hear it, playing the kind of stand by your man. She decries this, right? She says, I'm not just Tammy Wynette standing by her man, but she kind of is. It's a snapshot of a politician who will look very different 20 years later.
Totally. And then the other thing, though, worth noting is like, okay, so there's lots of rumors about Clinton's behavior. Not rumors. I mean, it's known that he has, that he has lots of affairs and he behaves badly in this regard. There was also a lot of investigation going on around Clinton, but actually not necessarily around his affairs at this point. And so we should just take a moment to lay out another big part of the backstory here and the sort of the ambient environment here, which is that there is an independent counsel leading an investigation into the Whitewater scandal, genuine scandal, and that starts in the summer of 1994. Ken Starr is a name that a lot of people might know. He was appointed as the independent counsel. Now, I am not going to burden either of you with trying to explain Whitewater here, but it is basically like a very complex series of shady financial dealings around real estate in Arkansas. But it does play into this because the context of Bill Clinton is being hounded by Republicans and by an independent counsel obviously plays into how all of this plays out, right?
Absolutely. And it's also important to add another component to it, which is that the idea of all of these scandals swirling around the Clintons, Whitewater is probably the most prominent, but there's Travelgate, there's Filegate, there's all of these different gates that are happening. And in part, it's the Republican opposition, but there's also something called the Arkansas Project, which is funded by Richard Mellon Scaife, who is pouring millions of dollars into outlets like the American Spectator. David Brock, who people might now know as a lefty, was at the time like the main attack dog of the right, were writing all of these stories, these cover stories for American Spectator that were trying to build this air of scandal around the Clintons. And Starr is really pulling from the work of the Arkansas Project in his investigation of the Clintons.
And then in 94 is also, we've done episodes on this, but that's the Republican Revolution led by Newt Gingrich. You know, there's a kind of whole new generation of young, very aggressive Republicans who take over control in the House. That is obviously context here in that you have an opposition party feeling very emboldened and empowered to go after what they see as a very scandal-ridden and vulnerable president. So we have bad behavior, scandal,
a new Congress.
So all that is just sort of context that's swirling into, the middle and into the summer of 1995. And as I said, in November of 95 is when Lewinsky and Bill Clinton begin their sexual relationship. And one interesting tidbit here, and I wonder how much you think this really matters, but by all accounts, their first encounter was during a government shutdown in November of 95. Is that just like an interesting little tidbit, or does that actually play into this story?
I think it gives a little context. For one, this is the first government shutdown. So the public had not experienced anything like this before, in which government workers are all pretty much sent to go home. But the people who are left in the office are really the unpaid interns. So someone like Monica Lewinsky would still be in the office, which brings up a lot of questions of, if there was never a shutdown, would this have happened? Or, like if other people were in the office, would this, would someone have shut it down earlier? Who knows? But I do think it makes for an environment, at least in which opportunity is there for encounters to happen without the level of scrutiny that would be there if tons of people were around to sort of say, hey, where are you going? What are you doing?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like a president and an intern, much less likely to interact with one another in a different situation, more eyes on the street to catch what's going on if there's not a shutdown. And I also think it plays into the story of the backdrop you were just talking about with Congress. It matters that Republicans had control of the House, because they had control of the purse and they had control of investigations, as opposed to if they were in the Senate. And so because they have control of the budget, that leads to the government shutdown. And because they have control of investigations, that is going to lead to the kind of florid investigation of the Clintons that follows after. And so I think it gives us a sense of the consequence of the House being under the control of Republicans at this point.
Yeah. By all accounts, or reportedly, Lewinsky first comes into the Oval Office when she's bringing pizza to Clinton during the shutdown, and then they have a little flirtatious moment. He then finds reasons to bring her back into the Oval Office. In December of 95, she actually moves into a paid position at the Office of Legislative Affairs, where she handles letters from members of Congress, which actually gives her reason to be delivering mail to the Oval Office. And it kind of goes from there. She's actually transferred in April of 96 to a different job. And by all accounts, I think that was because people started to know what was going on. And they were like, we need to just separate these two. Look, a big part of this story is that a lot of the very sordid details would come out both in the press and in the Starr report. But any other kind of tidbits about the affair itself that you want to get into?
I mean, I think it's so important to talk about the age difference and the power dynamic. Like, Lewinsky is 22. She starts when she's 21 as the unpaid internship, but she's 22 at the time. And I think about, like, especially Nikki, we're professors. These are the age of our students. You know what I mean? They're still knuckleheads. You know what I mean? Like, they're still, all the green is there. And I'm not trying to say that she was a child or that she was not, sort of aware or anything like that. But the power dynamic, I think, was never fully teased out in this conversation. The fact that she is so young, and the fact that people are at least skeptical of something going on and not, I think, adamant enough about sort of breaking that up or intervening, is telling. It's really, really telling.
I think so too. And like, it's not that she doesn't consent. She's like an enthusiastic partner in this relationship. She's flirting with him. Looking back, she's so young. She's such a baby. And just keeping in mind that the conversations around consent and power dynamics and sex. We're in 1995. This is just a couple years after the Anita Hill hearings, which really put the conversation about sexual harassment on the table. And again, this is a different kind of dynamic, but it's the conversation around sex, workplace, power dynamics, consent is so different in this period and might help explain why in the coverage that comes after, Monica Lewinsky is portrayed as the aggressor, as like the problem.
Seductress.
Yes. All the
she
things.
Definitely gets that.
I also think it's interesting to talk about Clinton's age, because in our contemporary times, we're used to old presidents. They're in their 80s, late 70s, whatever. But Clinton's 47?
49.
49?
He was very young when 49. He was elected.
Yes, he's 47 when he's elected. So he's a young president, not the youngest, but young. And so the idea of like him being this attractive middle-aged man, I mean, attractive is subjective, but still, like, this charismatic 49-year-old man, I think, is something that isn't always discussed either.
I think it's probably worth saying, just for people who don't know the scandal, obviously there's a power dynamic here and there's an abuse of the power dynamic here. There was never an allegation that Clinton physically or sexually abused Lewinsky. I mean, this was a consensual affair. Given, within the context of an imbalanced power dynamic. So let's maybe start to introduce a couple other characters into this whole situation. So I guess this is where we need to talk about Linda Tripp. So Tripp is an employee at the Pentagon, a coworker at this point of Lewinsky who has been transferred around within the government. And Lewinsky starts to just talk to her new friend Linda about her relationship with the president.
Linda's not your friend, girl.
We will soon learn. But, Linda Tripp is one of the most, I would say, mocked and parodied and kind of interesting wrinkles in this whole story. But she very quickly realizes there's something here and starts to secretly record their conversations, which is quite the move.
She sure does. I mean, she recognizes the historic nature of the confessions of the woman in her early 20s.
Oh, so she's just acting as a sort of independent National Archives in the public interest?
Think of her as a historian of a kind, asking questions to sort of elicit the story. She doesn't like Clinton. She's conservative, and she sees in these revelations that Lewinsky is sharing with her a way to bring Clinton down. And I think she's in conversations even at this point with a woman named Lucianne Goldberg, trying to figure out how to use this information that she's being given. And she's advised by Goldberg to tape these conversations. I'm still trying to imagine what this taping looks like because, it's not the age of the iPhone, right? So she has to have a little recorder, like the ones that journalists use in order to make these tapes and then smuggle them out of the Pentagon and then take them to the folks who are putting the case together against Clinton.
I mentioned in the intro that maybe we'd talk about SNL, and here we are. I'm going to mention SNL very early, or earlier than I thought we were going to in this episode, but because I do remember a parody of Linda Tripp, and I believe Chris Farley played Linda Tripp on SNL, and has this moment where she's like, talk a little closer into the flower on my lapel or whatever, very, it's funny, but I mean, man, that's pretty harsh to have Chris Farley playing Linda Tripp. And
is this something that also I think about that I don't know is necessarily covered, but in the late 90s, sure, there were people who felt very strongly about their political beliefs, but they were not at all worn on their sleeve as much as we think about today when we are embarking on new friendships or relationships. And a lot of that sort of where do you stand? Who are you? Yada, yada. It's sort of established early on when we could make these new connections. Right. And I wonder how much her knowing or not knowing where Linda stood politically and her being in opposition to Clinton would have made her more reserved to share those kinds of ideas had she felt like, she had a friend.
Oh, that's really interesting.
I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely that idea that we're just all public servants and we don't talk about.
Yes, and we don't talk about how we vote. We don't. Yes, and her feeling like Linda's older than her as well, so maybe feeling like that's also sort of a mentee mentor vibe, or the idea that she could share with her or trust her. Again, is also part of Lewinsky's naivete and greenness. The fact that you would share that at a workspace, no less, is also equally problematic. But
I think they did a lot of their conversations at a mall. Is that right? At a food court at a mall. I think
Tyson's
we should.
Corner.
Yeah, exactly. We should shout out a friend of the show, Leon Nafok, and Slow Burn. Slow Burn did a great series on more on the impeachment that would eventually come at the end of all of this. But there was some really fascinating stuff in there about the Linda Tripp, Monica Lewinsky dynamic and how all that kind of went down and how they met up and how they built trust with each other and so forth. So, they get into this in a really interesting way.
And that building of trust is important because one of the reasons why Lewinsky is spilling her guts to this woman is because she's heartbroken. Yeah. She just had this relationship. It came to a very abrupt end. She can no longer come into any contact with Bill Clinton. She wants to be in contact with him. So her trust has been broken in the most powerful man in the world. And now she is about to be betrayed by the person she's confiding in. That's a lot for a 22-year-old.
Oh,
totally.
Gosh, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Okay, so let's advance how this starts to get out into both the sort of legal swirl around Clinton and then into the public. But We mentioned that their affair starts in November of 95. It goes through into the beginning of 97. By the fall of 97, Tripp is taping her conversations with Lewinsky. And then it's interesting. There is this moment in December of 97 where Lewinsky is subpoenaed by lawyers for Paula Jones, whose name we mentioned, but she was one of the women who was suing Clinton and was part of the scandal that sort of dogged Clinton while he was running for president. But clearly word is getting out that Clinton is still having affairs. There's this woman, Monica Lewinsky. And so the first kind of place she gets called to testify is actually in this other scandal or this other effort around Paula Jones, who was suing the president on sexual harassment charges. Very quickly after that, a month or so after that, in January of 98, Linda Tripp contacts the office of Ken Starr to talk about the tapes that she had made of these conversations. Now, here's my big question about this moment, which is really the moment where it kind of all explodes. Ken Starr is investigating Whitewater, a botched real estate deal. Why is Linda Tripp calling Ken Starr about an affair of Clinton's? And why is Ken Starr feeling like this is a call that he should take?
The purview of the Ken Starr investigation, let's say that it expanded beyond its original bounds. I mean, look, the Starr investigation, the independent counsel's office was investigating every single conspiracy, every single story, every single scandal around Bill Clinton. They were investigating Paula Jones. They were investigating the suicide of Vince Foster. Brett Kavanaugh, who is working for independent counsel Ken Starr, is tasked with going through and figuring out whether the right-wing sort of smear that Vince Foster was murdered by the Clintons was actually true. This is what the government's resources were being spent on. So there was a real sense, certainly by 97, 98, that if you had dirt on the Clintons, if you had any potential lead for them, especially if you were connected in right-wing circles, you knew exactly who to go to get this information investigated. And you knew you would find a very eager ear in the independent counsel office.
And the counsel office is obviously being aided and cheerleaded by the newly emboldened Congress. And I mean, Newt Gingrich, I think, is in many ways, I mean, we've talked, we laid out the various forces that this story really sort of put into action in terms of scandal and the media environment. But I also think part of it is also just like the widespread, we'll just investigate everything kind of vibe that I think has lasted until this day. And I think Newt Gingrich kind of pioneered that, right?
Having affairs of his own, might I add.
Well, that's true. But it's like if we're the opposition, we're just going to pick up anything and roll it into one big, long, rolling scandal that just kind of follows everything and everything at once, right?
Yes. I mean, then you're doing political whack-a-mole, trying to knock down as many things as you can. And you can never really accomplish any sort of political agenda because you're on defense with every single moment.
And part of the goal was to delegitimize Clinton, right? Just, because he had won by a plurality instead of a majority in both 92 and 96, there was already the sense in the right, well, he was president, I guess, but he wasn't really president. And so they felt sort of unleashed to go after him in any way possible. And by generating these constant scandals, they were able to do so. Now, Gingrich himself, he tried to moderate just a little bit on this because he actually found Clinton very amenable to some of his economic ideas. Like Clinton had a conservative streak in him. And so there were ways that Gingrich was like, oh, maybe I can actually get what I want out of this guy. Because they were talking in 96 and 97 about things like Medicare and Medicaid reform and reforming Social Security, scare quotes around all of that. But that agenda actually gets scotched by all of this scandal and then ultimately impeachment because Bill Clinton's like, well, I'm not going to work with those guys. I need to short my Democratic base.
Yeah.
Without getting too into the weeds of all the sort of subpoenas and hearings and perjuries and so forth that happen, it is worth pointing out that like that middle stretch of January 98 is really where this all starts to take off. And so, as we said, Linda Tripp gets in touch with the independent counsel office on January 12th. January 16th, the Court of Appeals gives Starr the green light to roll in the Clinton-Lewinsky allegations to his portfolio. And moreover, like really go after this question of whether she had lied when she had given her testimony back in December. And then in the next day, January 17th, Bill Clinton gives a deposition as part of the Paula Jones lawsuit, but then he's asked about Lewinsky and he denies ever having sexual contact or relations with Lewinsky. This, of course, is where it starts to really unravel for Clinton as the perjury element of this as well. He denies it from the very beginning and then clearly gets caught in those denials. And then on January 19th, 1998, is the first moment that Lewinsky's name pops up on a little thing called the internet. So now we talk about the media environment that all of this kind of started to trickle out into. And we're going to do this sort of in two parts. They obviously play with each other, but there's like the internet, which is a whole new force. And then there's cable news. And then obviously there's legacy media, newspapers and networks and so forth. But I do want to start with the internet. And Nikki, I mean, is this kind of the first big story that the internet broke?
This is definitely when the internet comes of age, right? People start to understand, oh, this can be a really powerful force. It's only in like 95, 96 that you're getting sites like Slate. The New York Times gets online in 1996. But not that many people are just kind of getting online in a lot of ways. This is when you're getting your first internet browsers, which makes it easier to get around online. So it is a pretty new technology for the average American. And it was still a little mysterious. And so the internet hadn't had its like moment yet. And this really is the moment, in part because we can get into some of the backstory later, but legacy media has this story. Michael Isikoff at Newsweek had Lewinsky's name. He had the parameters of the scandal because he was getting it from Lucianne Goldberg and other people within on the conservative side feeding it to him. But he had to double, triple check all of his sources and make sure it was shored up and fact checked and all of that. Over on the internet, the Drudge report, which touted itself as the homepage of the internet, it was an aggregator of all of the links that Drudge thought were important. Over at the Drudge report, he had no such compunction about shoring up his sources, in part because, again, he was getting this straight from people who were working on the Paula Jones lawsuit. And so once he feels like he has enough to go with it, he doesn't have to wait for the morning edition to run. He just hits
upload,
publish, and there it is, right? Monica Lewinsky's name and the allegation that Clinton was having an affair.
Can you, for people who didn't live in the glory days of the Drudge Report, though it's still a sneakily very powerful force, right? But what does it look like when you go to drudgereport.com in the late 90s into the 2000s?
I would not call it a technologically attractive site, right? It's very much graphic design is my passion. So it's just like it's a white backdrop, usually like an unframed photograph of some picture that's related to what's going on in the day. And then in very big all caps font and red lettering, whatever the big story that he wants to drive you to, and then just in blue, link, all the way down the page. There's no design to it. There's nothing except we have aggregated these links and we are going to drive traffic to all of these different stories. And so that's what it looked like and that's what it acted like. And it actually was really powerful because for many people, especially journalists and influential people, it was their homepage. Yeah.
One of the other calling cards was the siren, right? The Drudge siren would show up next to big headlines, and that would mean a huge scandal. I don't know if there was a siren next to the Lewinsky story, or if he developed that later. But and we don't have to do a big backstory on Matt Drudge, but I think clearly taking the vibe and the approach of traditional tabloid scandal-ridden journalism, bringing it to the internet and politics, and this story is just perfect for him. But it is fascinating to me how quickly then, all of a sudden, it's just reversed. The legacy news is chasing the internet, which is just sort of unheard of, I think, even like 6 months earlier to think that.
Yeah. No, that to me is what sets sort of the new tone. Like, that instantaneousness nature of the internet where you don't have to wait. It could post at, 5, 4 in the morning, whenever, is also when people are having this like 24-hour news cycle that we're going to get into, like how that gets fueled. is the fact that you have immediate access.
Yeah, that those reinforce one another.
Yeah.
The cable news that we'll talk about 24 hours a day, they have a lot of space that they need to fill. But the internet, too, you hit publish and now you've broken the story.
Right.
And that instantaneity is pretty marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like Drudge has a press pass to go to White House briefings or access to the president, right? I mean, and so there's this dynamic where it's like he's posting stuff, and it's often like documents that have been leaked to him, or just rumors that he's heard, or people are just taking him out for a drink and giving him some info, and then he posts it, and then legacy media has to then go and kind of like follow up and write it up, and then ask the questions in the press conference. It's just this really fascinating dynamic.
That's what it is.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, and he can be wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't have to do the work of figuring out whether it's true or not. He becomes, in some ways, the assignment editor for all of these news desks, because they have to go figure out, well, now this story that everyone's talking about, what do we actually know
now
about
you
it?
prove it. Now you go prove it.
Right,
I threw it out there.
So January 19th, 98 is when it first shows up on Drudge. Very quickly, within the next few days, news organizations are starting to report on the alleged relationship between Lewinsky and Clinton. They're starting to ask the White House about it. And January 26th, 98 is when Clinton says, I think one of the most famous lines, I would say, in American presidential history. He says, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky." Mm-hmm. Do you want to do a close reading of that phrasing of that statement, or even the delivery of that? I mean, I can still hear the cadence in my head.
I can still hear the very deliberate wording of that in my head, but also the fact that the use of the phrase sexual relations is also something that's really sort of muddied, because it's not necessarily clear. Is sexual relations, is that sex? Is it intercourse? Is it kissing? Is it, how he interprets of course, the legalese, the semantics of this all is how Clinton really is somewhat masterful in being able to get around certain language by using this kind of a phrase. And also what he qualified for being a part of sexual relations and what the public is interesting.
And I think that what's kind of masterful about this statement, although it doesn't save him, is that he is lawyering out the ass. Like, he is, if you do the close read, he'll tell you oh, it depends on what the definition of sexual relations is.
Yes.
But he's delivering it in a completely non-hedging way, right? He's delivering it as in, I'm looking straight down the barrel of the camera. I'm wagging my finger. The way that he says that woman, Miss Lewinsky, is awful. I imagine her watching that and what that must have felt like. But it's that combination of relying on the most weaselly, lawyerly definitions and delivering it with the most kind of stark, non-hedging language that is kind of the Clinton genius. Though again, doesn't work this
can
way.
I just say, it also is and it's not straight coming off the heels of Clarence Thomas and the same sort of belligerent, defiant response that makes people sort of pull back a little bit. Well, is he lying or is he telling the truth? That is adamant there. And in both cases, the women and how they feel or are positioned in this moment is never really front and center anymore. It's all about their defense.
It's the men's anger, not the women's.
Yes.
I agree that it's that woman and I just even remember it at the time, that just struck me as so scuzzy.
Feels like you people.
Yeah. Okay, I want to go back to the particular media dynamic and the way this story was framed and how it turned into a scandal, and then we'll wrap up part one here. But I want to read some of the headlines. So I mentioned, Drudge breaks this story January 17th, 1998. The headline on Drudge that day is Newsweek kills story on White House intern. And then below it says blockbuster report, 23-year-old former White House intern had a sexual relationship with the president. But the fact that it's framed as Newsweek killed this story is really fascinating to me. And then I will also point out that a couple of days later, the Washington Post really jumps on this story. They break it. They're the first mainstream press to break it. And they, in there, write their headline when they first read a story is Clinton accused of urging aide to lie. And so I'm just struck by the fact that both those big headlines are about a cover-up, not about the relationship itself. And maybe that is just that old adage, it's not the lie, it's the cover-up.
Well, there's not an underlying crime.
Right.
Right. This is so different from Watergate because it's not that they were covering up a crime. He's covering up an affair. And that's so they like you could focus on the affair, but that doesn't get you anywhere. It's not high crime and misdemeanor. So it's interesting that right away there is this kind of Watergate-ian framing of the cover-up. In Drudge's case, he is focusing on Newsweek because that's his competition. His competition is legacy print media. And so this is part of his argument for his reporting and his site is we don't kill stories. We tell you what's actually happening. And in the case of the Washington Post, it's, if there's a crime here and a crime that could lead to the impeachment and removal of the president, something the Washington Post has some history with, it's not going to be about the affair. It's going to be about directing someone to lie and commit perjury.
But I mean, it shows you the evil genius of Drudge and a template that's been set until this moment, that continues until this moment, which is the mainstream media doesn't want you to know this is so at the heart of all of this. And it says much about the fact that Newsweek killed this story and the internet is bringing you the unfiltered truth. And I mean, Nikki, you've written many books about this kind of line of thinking and this sort of the way that conspiracy meets skepticism of elites and so forth. But like, what is in the late 90s, that sort of stew that Drudge is operating in terms of that kind of conspiratorial thinking about media elites?
It is at its peak for the 20th century.
Really?
It's an argument that the right had been making for decades. It sort of breaks through into the mainstream in '69 when Spiro Agnew starts attacking the media for liberal bias. But it's really hypercharged in the 1990s. That's when you get the birth of a kind of popular, profitable right-wing media like Rush Limbaugh, who is in league with the new Republicans who are running the House. And so they're lifting up that argument. They're lifting up the scandals. They're lifting up the conspiracies. And so that merger of the Republican Party with the right-wing media infrastructure to make the vast right-wing conspiracy that Hillary Clinton is complaining about. This is that moment. There's so much skepticism on the right of any sort of mainstream media source. And now there is so much room for them to create a true alternative media, but a true alternative media that's also incredibly popular on the right, that makes a ton of money. And with the entree of Fox News onto the scene, you just really get more the right-wing ecosystem as we know it today. It's forming in this moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I would say the beginnings of giving people what they want to hear or giving people what they want to read, that idea that you are not presenting facts in this sort of objective way, but it's also about like what will drive clicks, what will drive traffic, what will keep the reader's eyeballs on this, TV station, whatever it is. That is more the motivator for anything else other than, and then, facts are secondary.
Yeah.
But it's like, how do we build allegiance from people that really want to be fed certain narratives?
Right. That merger of news and entertainment is happening in this moment. I mean, this is when you start to get The Daily Show and Politically Incorrect. People are starting to expect their news and their politics to come packaged with a laugh, or at least with
an agenda.
Kind of shock value. And do they get it good and hard.
Yeah, for sure. And, I would say that that idea that we just give people what they want, and if they're clicking on it, it shows that it's, ipso facto worth putting out there, certainly motivates someone like Drudge, but I think is also very much at the heart of a place like Fox News. And Fox News, lo and behold, ends up hiring Drudge pretty soon after this to host a show. And really kind of we see the nexus there of the two, I would say, new kinds of media approaches around this affair. And that is what we're going to get into next episode. We're going to really take a look at the rise of Fox News and Fox News's role in all of this. But we will leave it here for part one of week 10 in 50 Weeks That Shaped America. We have the basics of the scandal and the investigation in place. Next episode, we will talk about how Fox became such a powerful force in our media and politics, and how we were all given, as Nikki put it, the politics of today. So for now, as always, Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kelly Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. It's 50 Weeks That Shaped America, Week 10, Part 2, 1998. What other numbers can I throw at our listeners to confuse them? But look, listeners, here we are. I'm not here to confuse. I'm here to pick up the story of Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky, Linda Tripp, Ken Starr, scandal, internet news, Matt Drudge, and lots more. Before we reset where we are in the story, here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kelly Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
So last episode, we talked about how the affair between Lewinsky and Clinton started in November of 95 during a government shutdown, how it lasted all the way through 96 into the very beginning of 97. And then over the course of 97, a slow trickle of information and depositions and scandal about it. It then explodes into the public in January of 98. We talked about the Drudge Report having broken it online and then all the legacy media having to scramble. And we mentioned that there was a kind of new dynamic here between the world of online journalism and what we would often call traditional outlets like newspaper and the networks. And of course, in all of this, there's also cable news, especially since this was a GOP-driven scandal in many ways. Fox News is a huge force, and that is where I want to start. The first time we've really dug into the role of Fox News in American politics and culture during this series. I don't know, Nikki, it's not like Fox News is legacy media at this point. So like in the grand scheme of things, are they like the new kids on the block still, or are they closer to Drudge and the online shit kickers, or are they more, traditional media?
Oh, in 1996, they are very much the shit kickers, right?
Yeah.
They're as you mentioned at the end of last episode, they hire Matt Drudge and put him on TV, which may not have been his most natural media home. But they're trying to find like who are the cool young conservatives that we can put on air, and they pick people like Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly. But they also, along with MSNBC, which launches in 1996 as well, they're looking for people like Ann Coulter and Laura Ingraham and these like young, attractive conservatives who are provocative and who are going to make just great television, even if they're not necessarily rooted in journalism and reporting. And I think that's the big difference. CNN had been a 24-hour news station since the 1980s, and they really worked hard to staff the network with reporters. Yeah. They were like, how do you fill 24 hours of news? Well, you go out and you get 24 hours worth of news. They moved from that model a little bit. But when MSNBC and Fox News come around, they're not looking for journalists. They're looking for telegenic pundits. And that's what they staff their outlets with.
So important. I mean, that goes right back into like what you were saying in the previous episode about entertainment. Yeah. Like, you're not just getting, this is not your Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather, like this is your salacious, your soap opera type of news that you want to tune into. Not that you feel obligated to, because I feel like a lot of families are like, it's 5 o'clock, it's 6 o'clock. We got to watch the evening news. We got to know what's going on in the world. This you tune in for a completely different reason, not for information, but to simply be like tantalized.
Yeah. Well, and Rupert Murdoch, the founder of Fox News, who then puts Roger Ailes in charge of Fox News, and Ailes is at the helm at this point in 96 to 98. But Rupert Murdoch comes out of tabloid television, and I was reading something about him recently, and I'm going to botch the phrase, but I think he has a saying that's something like, a tabloid is printed to be sold. Like, like you make this so that people buy it. There's no higher calling. There's no other kind of larger charge. It's just you print the thing, and if people buy it, you've done a good job. And if they don't, you don't. And I believe Rupert Murdoch believes that to his core. And he brings that to Fox News.
Absolutely. And Murdoch, the Murdoch-Ailes partnership is really important because Rupert Murdoch is conservative and he wants to spread conservative ideas. Like he launched the Weekly Standard the year before. Fox News has a conservative bent, but it's Roger Ailes who's the true believer. Roger Ailes also wants to make money. He also wants to make a flashy product. He comes from a background in entertainment television, in late night shows. So he has that like razzle dazzle, but he wants right-wing content. He wants to bring down Bill Clinton. He wants to get a Republican president. He wants to empower Newt Gingrich. And that combination is what makes Fox News really distinct. Because otherwise, Fox News and MSNBC, when they were first starting out, just weren't that different. There were lots of conservatives on both, but Fox News stands out because of the role of Roger Ailes.
I'm stating the most obvious thing in the world, but when this Lewinsky story comes along, it is tailor-made for Fox News, right? It's exactly what they're looking for. So how do they now mobilize the entire operation to cover this thing?
I mean, this is when the Fox executive editor says that Monica is a news channel dream come true. That basically they can take this story of her, this young woman, and they can roll tape again and again and again, coming up with new angles, coming up with new facts, talking about her personal life, talking about her in high school, talking to her friends, people who knew her. I mean, they cannot get enough of dissecting this poor woman over and over again. And it sells. People tune in to find out more information about her than any other thing that's going on in the world right now. Yeah. And very important things are going on in the world. And that dominates the conversation. And this is really like what Monica Lewinsky has is almost like a political paparazzi. Like she cannot escape. She's not a celebrity in the way that you think of like a Britney Spears, but she cannot get away from the hounding of the press and being able to tell her story or find some new trinket that they can run with.
Yeah, and it is a scandal tailor-made for this kind of television. First of all, because it's about sex. And it gives them an entree to talk about sex, to be provocative in that sort of like, way that's not just crossing lines in terms of like crossing the line politically, but crossing the line in terms of what they talk about in terms of sex. They debate whether or not Monica Lewinsky is an average girl or a tramp. The word tramp gets thrown around a lot over the course of these conversations. And it's great, right? Because there's hypocrisy that they can talk about because feminists are lining up behind Clinton. And so it's very easy to skewer sort of the folks who are around Bill Clinton during this period. And it's got drama, right? Because there's going to be a court case, there's going to be impeachment. So it has all of that kind of built-in drama.
We talked last time about how Clinton uses that phrase sexual relations. I mean, we know that the model, you can fill 2 full days just debating that term, right?
And people are going to watch because you are going to say some filthy things in the process of trying to define sexual relations.
Yeah.
I think the other thing to sort of build on Kelly's point is that this will be shocking to folks who weren't alive at the time, but during the 1990s and 2000s, the way the media talked about women and women's bodies and women's sex lives was, I get like goosebumps just thinking about it because it's so awful and it's so embarrassing and it's so shameful. Just the way that they would talk about Lewinsky and talk about her weight and her going to fat camp and calling her a predator. Maureen Dowd, who wins the Pulitzer, and I realize that she is like a traditional news media person, but it fits into the point. She talked about Monica Lewinsky as being the girl who was too tubby to be in the high school in crowd, which is just gross. And this is the way women were talked about all the time. And because these new news networks had hired all of these young, blonde, conservative women to do the talking. Now you have women who are saying it about other women, and it's gross, and it's really entertaining for the viewers who tune in, and it saturates the media environment.
Yeah.
And dare I say, it is more powerful when a woman punches down on another woman than when the man does it. It's like, oh, okay, well, you can kind of expect that from him. But women get empowered of punching down on Monica Lewinsky. I mean, Maureen Dowd, she's still on the New York Times payroll. Like she made her career in a lot of ways off of bullying. And that's really what this is too. This is also the beginning of like cyberbullying. This is what Monica Lewinsky talks about a lot as well. There's so many overtones and undertones into how she is being dissected. That, and it happens to Clinton too as well, but it is not the same sort of ad hominem attacks that she's facing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, roughly speaking, the right-wing leaning press, Fox News, Drudge, they're going after Clinton over the lying, not over the "you slept with your intern," right? Which I think says something. But look, Kelly, you pointed out that Maureen Dowd is out there that when women punch down. But, this is clearly a masculine environment that they are building on cable news. And so this is where we get, Brit Hume gets a nightly show, Special Investigation with Brit Hume. Ratings go through the roof. They go from 600,000 to 2.2 million per month by the time of the impeachment hearings. Geraldo Rivera is in the mix. He has a show on CNBC. Chris Matthews has Hardball. And then, as we mentioned, MSNBC is founded right around this same time, a couple years earlier. And they obviously pick up on this as well. And Keith Olbermann is given a show called White House in Crisis. And he has to host a show every single night. But the time we get through January, February, March, April, by the time we get to May, I want to read this quote from Keith Olbermann where he says, on TV, he says, as he's hosting the show, White House in Crisis, "There are days now when my line of work makes me ashamed, makes me depressed, makes me cry. About 3 weeks ago, I awakened from my stupor on this subject and told my employers that I simply could not continue doing this show about the endless investigation and the investigation of the investigation and the investigation of the investigation of the investigation. I had to choose what I felt in my heart was right over what I felt in my wallet was smart." Nice words from Keith Olbermann, who continues to host a show on MSNBC and cover this scandal for the next months and months and months.
Peak Olbermann, where it's just like so sanctimonious with absolutely no behavioral change. Just sums him up so perfectly.
Yeah.
But really are there voices at this early stage, 3 months into, not the scandal, but the media kind of environment around the scandal, who are saying, gosh, this is icky?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are, especially in sort of what's considered more hard news. You get criticisms coming from people like Tom Brokaw and Peter Jennings, who are critical of the entire enterprise of cable news, right? They just think that it's salacious, that it's not news, that's punditry. Not wrong, but they're very critical of that model of political entertainment, political information, however you want to talk about it. So there are critical voices out there, but they are just frankly on the losing side of these changes in the media, and ultimately will be part of it. And like, NBC does not have its hands clean. I mean, NBC News and MSNBC are part of the same parent company, so they're all part of the same project, even though it looks different what they're doing each night.
Right. And it's not like the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal are ignoring this. I mean, they're clearly covering it as well. They're just not yapping for 24 hours about the definition of sexual relations. They're talking about the blue dress and the cigar and all the other kind of like awful sort of tidbits that float out of all this.
All the reporting that they're talking about on these 24-hour cable news channels is coming from real news reporters. Right.
And this, of course, is one of the ironies at the heart of all of this, is that these take factories need actual reporting to be able to kind of offer the takes. And
as we have learned, maybe no, they don't. But at the time, they're still reliant on it.
Yeah. I do want to point out kind of one thing about the sort of explosion of Fox News in this moment. There's a man by the name of John Moody, who was the sort of executive editor at Fox News at the time. He seems not wired the same way Roger Ailes is. He seems a little bit more of a traditional news person, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that he's kind of the anchor for some of Ailes's wilder flights of fancy. And he stays with the network. I think he's pushed out like pretty late in the game. Like, either he goes out when Ailes goes out, or he goes out after January 6th.
Yeah.
But
fairly
he's along
recently.
for a really long time.
And he's written, I think, a book, or was part of a big book about the history of Fox News, and has talked a lot about these kind of early days. And in sort of his reflection on this, he, on the one hand, acknowledges that the saga put Fox News on the news map, and that, the fair and balanced ethos or approach was what the country wanted, and it was this huge scandal. He has also said, quote, in retrospect, the most significant story of the year was one which we paid insufficient attention to. Had we realized what would happen 3 years later, we would have understood that the bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania were dry runs for 9/11. Like the rest of the West, we didn't connect the dots, and we would all pay a terrible price for that inattention. So, easy to be self-reflective many, many decades later, but there is John Moody kind of pointing out that it is a bit of a zero-sum game. If you decide to pay your attention to one thing, you are probably inevitably not paying your attention to something else.
But if I may, try putting the Kenya-Tanzania news on the top of the hour. No one cared. No one cared. No one had the desire to be like, oh, wow, it's really popping off over there. Maybe we should be. No one, I mean, you could probably, I would say, lose your job if you were trying to push a different narrative other than what people wanted to have. And I'm sure there are references to it. I'm sure people tried to, work it in there, or maybe it was like number 4 or 5 down the line. But you could not open with breaking news. The breaking news needed to be around this scandal if you are in that cable news cycle.
It definitely is a push-pull with the audience, because there is an endless appetite. As much as people complain about the wall-to-wall coverage, there's an endless appetite for information about this in a way that Americans have evinced very little interest in foreign policy. Is it a zero-sum game when you have 24 hours to fill?
No, maybe probably not. No.
But they're focused on maximizing money. They're not focused on news, regardless of what their names may be.
But the incrementalism is a big part of this, too. That, like, the latest small little detail in this big scandal is more interesting to people than a big new other story that you kind of have to introduce. And obviously, like, that's the model. But, you can get yourself from like these next 6 hours to the next 6 hours to the next 6 hours by just laying out one little tidbit and the scandal, as we've been saying, was kind of perfectly built for that, with just little incremental things coming out. So let's circle back now to how, and we won't do a full, this could be a full two-parter in itself, but let's circle back now to how the investigations play out and obviously the eventual impeachment of Clinton. But, once we're into the spring and summer of 98, people are testifying. Ken Starr is subpoenaing a ton of folks. Lewinsky has lawyered up. Clinton is getting caught in some of these sort of lies and misframings. What are the other kind of key moments that then eventually turn this into something that results in the House, bringing impeachment proceedings against Clinton?
There's just a lot of legal maneuvering that's happening, because for all of the talk about sex and Monica Lewinsky and all these different things, like there's a legal case that's unfolding here. You have a grand jury that's impaneled to investigate Monica Lewinsky, to investigate Clinton. Clinton invokes executive privilege. Now you have a showdown between Clinton and the courts. Lewinsky gets immunity in exchange for her grand jury testimony. She turns over the infamous blue dress, which has Clinton's semen on it, and they test that, and it makes clear that whatever his definition of sexual relations is, his semen is on her dress. So there is some close sexual contact that happened between the two of them. And then he becomes, in August of 1998, the first sitting president to testify before a grand jury that is investigating his conduct. And after he gives that grand jury testimony, he knows that's going to leak. So he goes on television and he's like, remember when I said that thing about that woman, Monica Lewinsky? Well, I still believe that I was right technically. He does apologize for lying to the American people, and he admits the relationship.
In that grand jury testimony is where we get another one of the iconic phrases from this whole scandal, which is where Clinton talks about, he's told, well, look, you said there is nothing going on between us. Months ago, you told your staff there's nothing going on between us. And Clinton's response to that is, well, it depends on what the meaning of the word is. If is means is and never has been, that is one thing. If is means there is none, that was completely true statement.
Right. Like, are you, like, if somebody asked him today, is there a sexual relationship between you and Monica Lewinsky? He would say no, because there isn't one.
Yeah.
There was
There you
one.
go. Look at you, a Clinton apologist.
It's like wrong question.
But that phrase, it
But he's a
depends
lawyer, right?
Yeah. It
Yes,
depends
of
on what the
course.
definition of is
That's
always
it's
going to stay in my
ridiculous.
head. And I will say, I think it was Slate, who we've only mentioned very briefly here, but I think it was Slate that actually broke that little like footnote from the grand jury testimony and really ran with it. Slate is kind of they're the like, good Drudge, but they're definitely chasing this thing and have a big moment in this as well.
Yeah. And the reason that the meaning of is thing sticks out is because that is the epitome of Clinton's slickness.
Yes.
And that idea that like, oh, he got out of our grasps again, kind of feeling that the right has toward him. And so it's such an iconic moment because it's so much the essence of Clinton.
September of 98, 445-page Star Report is released, has tons of salacious details in it.
Instant bestseller.
Instant bestseller. A month later, the House Representative authorizes a wide-ranging impeachment inquiry into President Clinton, 258 to 176. 31 Democrats do join Republicans in supporting the investigation. I mean, we haven't pointed this out, but this is very clearly a partisan. I mean, and I think to Clinton's credit, he gets kudos for pretty early on framing this as a partisan issue.
Yes.
And then, as you mentioned, Hillary Clinton, I think it's in the first interview she gives after all this blows up in January of 98. She talks about the vast right-wing conspiracy. But very quickly, I think a lot of people, Americans, are able to they assess where they stand on this purely according to partisan lines, right?
But it also traps a lot of Democrats who would have gone in a different direction and actually disagreed with Clinton and felt like there should have been an investigation. Now they feel like they have to hold rank because by making this a partisan issue, well, I have to stand with the Democrats. And not all of them do. But the interesting part about this is like, if you're Clinton and you're a strategist, and he knows he has to be able to at least pull his party to his side above all else.
And he really works at that. Like I mentioned in the last episode that he had been working with Newt Gingrich on a grand strategy or a grand bargain for Social Security, and he has to drop that because he has to shore up his support with Democrats. So you kind of save Social Security by having sex with Monica Lewinsky, sexual relations, pardon me. But the thing is, it is a partisan attack.
Yeah.
It's a partisan witch hunt, and there were witches.
Yeah.
Like not like impeachment level witches, which I think is kind of the issue, and that's where the public falls. If you look at polling during this period, as much as it's framed as a partisan issue, the public is not particularly partisan about it. They look at this and they're like, I don't think he should be impeached over this, because the public largely understands it as a sex scandal, not as some sort of high crime and misdemeanor over the cover up.
Yeah. Well, look, Clinton does end up getting acquitted. The trial goes, December into January, February of 99. Clinton is acquitted of the 2 articles of impeachment on February 12th, 99. In April, he's held in civil contempt in a court. Obviously, this stuff continues to dog him. But what you just said, Nikki, I think gets us to the kind of, let's take a step back, think about the legacy of all of this as we start to wrap up this 2-parter. But one of the things that I think this really lays out is this idea that everything is partisan, and moreover, you are always waging a partisan battle, right? And I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that people weren't trying to bring presidents down while they were in office. But, this idea that like we have the election, we fight our battles there, and then it's over. And between the elections, we kind of try and get things done. I think this is one of the first places where you see just like, because of, in many ways, the media environment, it's just like, it's a forever war, right? And I mean, that's kind of one of the legacies for me, is just this understanding. And, obviously, what was it that Mitch McConnell said, the day that Obama got inaugurated, he said, our job is to make him a one-term president. Right? Our job is to fight between now and gum things up as much as possible between now and the next election. And I do see a little element of that in here.
Certainly.
And I think it's important to remember that that's an asymmetric process, right? Democrats do not spend the Bush administration investigating Bush and trying to bring him up on impeachment charges. As soon as Obama is in office, that process of scandalization and investigation immediately gets underway. Things that we don't even talk about anymore Solyndra and, Benghazi, which becomes the seeds for the things that the emails that end up harming Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. But it matters that that's asymmetric, for one.
Yes.
What is not asymmetric is in the immediate aftermath of Clinton's acquittal, you see a lot of resignations on the right because Larry Flynt, who ran Hustler magazine, put out a bounty who's like, anybody who's on this impeachment committee should give me evidence that they have had an affair, and like every single one of them had. Sure. It brings down Robert Livingston, who so Newt Gingrich resigns. Livingston is supposed to take his place as Speaker of the House. And if it comes out that he'd been having an extramarital affair, so he ends up resigning. It's just this like cascade.
Everyone starts coming out the woodwork.
Yeah, like everyone's doing it, which was kind of where the American people already were. But there is a real everyone's doing it vibe.
Interesting. Yes. What about the Fox News legacy? I mean, one thing that I'm struck by in here is that we think of Fox News as almost like the new kids on the block in this moment, as sort of a new template. This story made me realize that Fox and the internet never really could have coalesced, And I'm just curious about that dynamic that like for the last 30 years, plus, almost 30 years now, those worlds have fed into each other and talked to each other, but they never really merged in the way that maybe you would expect when you have these two big new forces arriving in the media landscape.
They definitely overlap, but they're distinct. Like one of the things is Roger Ailes understood what his media product was, and his media product was not the internet. It was cable television, and that had a distinct audience from the internet. It can compare that to MSNBC, where the MS stands for Microsoft. Like they were trying to integrate the internet from the launch in 1996. And that was less the case with Fox News, in part because they had an older audience. But then you see the development of the right-wing internet, not just Drudge, which did have a right tilt, but also WorldNet Daily, which was more conspiratorial. Breitbart, Andrew Breitbart actually worked at Drudge before he launched Breitbart, which has continuity through today. They are distinct worlds. The stories definitely feed one another, and they become an interlocking ecosystem, but they're just different products. And the other thing to say about Fox News that is distinct from the internet question is, like other outlets, it will look back at this period in the early 90s as a period of fluff. Like they definitely like build their reputation, but as soon as 9/11 happens, enormous changes. That's when Fox News really takes off. The 2000 election and then 9/11. After 9/11, they rebrand as like an all flags all the time channel. Uber patriotism. The women who had been hired in the 1990s basically disappear from actually most news channels. Like the defeminization of media.
Because we need serious reporters.
We need serious men to talk about serious things.
And it takes a while for women to get back in that. And even when they get the seat, it's temporary.
So those changes are happening at Fox as well, but they all sort of like are feeding the same goal that Ailes has, which is Republican power.
Kelly, any thoughts on the sort of legacy of how this shaped us, both from a political standpoint or a media standpoint or anything else?
I mean, I think a lot about two things. Well, one, after Clinton steps down, Gore makes his run for the presidency as well. That does not go over well. He distanced himself a lot from Clinton in an attempt to sort of set a new narrative. We did a whole episode about how the kiss that Al Gore gives his wife on stage to sort of show like, I love my wife, like there's this whole moment where people are trying to show themselves as not adulterers. But then I also think when it comes to Monica Lewinsky, I mean, like, this is where we talk about how women are always like the biggest losers because she can't get a job. She has the hardest time trying to navigate society. She really sort of reemerges again, I would say around 2014. So we're talking about almost 20 years later, 15 or so years later. She writes this essay for Vanity Fair about shame and surviving like the bullying, the intense bullying that she had. But then it's also kind of interesting because she also talked about how she voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 and just like how her own sort of evolution in this process. But I think her name will sort of forever be associated with scandal. And that's unfortunate. She kind of can't escape that.
Yeah.
Because Bill Clinton gets his second act. He doesn't slink away like Richard Nixon does. He builds the Clinton Global Initiative. He becomes a 100 millionaire. His wife becomes this very prominent political figure as well. He goes vegan. He's fine.
Men are always fine. Men are always
fine. She just struggles and struggles and struggles to be able to have a career and to have a voice, and that sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will leave it there. And I kind of framed this as our chance to talk about the impact of Fox News. And I've said this on the show before, but, if I had to make a list of what I think of as the most impactful and frankly destructive forces in American politics, I think Fox is at the top of my list, So this was our chance to kind of get into that. But I'm looking at our upcoming schedule and I'm like, oh, there's some other chances to talk about Fox News coming up, including next week we're going to stay in the 21st century. We're going to talk about Barack Obama and a speech he gave on his Pastor Jeremiah Wright, which was a speech in which he tried to put a scandal to the side, but also really offered some powerful remarks on how he thinks about the legacy of racism and his own race in this country. So really fascinating moment, another one that we all lived through and saw and have strong memories of. Future episodes, we're going to jump around to the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in 1911. We're going to talk about World War I, the assassination of MLK. Lots of really fascinating conversations coming up. But we will leave our look at the Monica Lewinsky. We didn't come up with our word that wasn't affair and wasn't scandal.
Well, look, we came in under 3 hours, which I consider a miracle because
we would not be good on
forever.
But we would. Well, so maybe you would be good on Fox News where you have to fill 24 hours. But we
on this topic,
yeah. All right.
24 hours on Fox News about Fox News.
Exactly.
That'll be my thing.
Yeah. Nicole Hammer, thanks to you as always.
Thanks, Jody.
And Kelly Carter Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This Day is a proud member of Radiotopia, a network of independent, artist-produced, listener-supported podcasts. Don't forget to sign up for our America 250 Watch newsletter. Every Thursday, you'll get exclusive access to analysis and information about the semi-quincentennial, commentary from our team, and a list of fascinating things that happened that week throughout history. And on Sundays, for our paid subscribers, you get early, ad-free access to our 50 Weeks That Shaped America series, plus other bonus conversations throughout the year. Join in, find out lots more, support the show at thisdaypod.com. You can also follow This Day Pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, and on YouTube. Get in touch with ideas or feedback at thisdaypod@gmail.com. Jacob Feldman is our researcher. Kala Nakua does our transcripts. Special thanks to Audrey Martovich, Yuri Lasordo, and everyone at Radiotopia. Extra special thanks to you for listening, subscribing, rating and reviewing, and telling others about the show. My name is Jody Avirgan. We'll see you soon.